The Volanti had never known war. For 12,000 years, their civilization had spread across 7 beautiful worlds. And in all that time, they had never needed to hurt another living thing. Their bodies were made of living crystal that sang with light. They spoke by changing colors, by pulsing and glowing in patterns that carried meaning. They built cities that looked like frozen music, towers of glass and light that reached toward the stars. They were artists, philosophers, dreamers. The very idea of violence was so far from their nature that they did not have a word for it in their language. When two Volanti disagreed, they would share light until they understood each other. Every problem could be solved with patience and understanding. This was what they believed. Then the Keth swarm came. The first warning came from a distant monitoring station at the edge of Volanti space. The station went silent one day without explanation. The Volanti sent a ship to investigate. That ship never returned. They sent another. It also vanished. By the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. The Keth were not like any species the Volanti had ever encountered. They were not interested in communication or trade or friendship. They did not want to share the galaxy. They wanted to consume it. The swarm moved from star to star like a plague of locusts, eating everything in their path. Planets, moons, asteroids, nothing was safe. They stripped worlds down to bare rock, harvesting every scrap of metal and every drop of water and every living thing. When they found the Volanti, they did not see a civilization. They saw food. The first garden world fell in 3 days. The Volanti there had no weapons, no defenses, no way to fight back. They tried to communicate with the Keth, to understand what they wanted, to find some peaceful solution. The Keth answered by landing on their cities and tearing them apart. Millions of Volanti died, their crystal bodies shattered and harvested for minerals. The second garden world fell a week later. This time, some Volanti tried to flee. Their ships were beautiful things, designed for comfort and elegance, meant to carry passengers between the stars in peace. The Keth warships caught them easily. They were not designed for beauty. They were designed for killing. The surviving Volanti gathered on their remaining 5 worlds and tried to understand what was happening. Their greatest minds came together to study the Keth, to find some weakness, some way to stop them. They found nothing. The swarm was too vast, too hungry, too different from anything the Volanti could comprehend. "We cannot fight them," said Elder Prismatic Light through ancient waters, the oldest and wisest of the Volanti. "We do not know how. We have never needed to know how." "Then what do we do?" asked Ambassador Crystalline Dawn over still waters. She was young for an elder, barely 800 years old, but she was known for her quick thinking and her courage. "Do we simply wait to die?" "There may be another option," said the elder. His light pulsed slowly, showing deep sadness and also a small spark of hope. "There is something our ancestors left behind. Something very old." He led them deep beneath the capital city, down through layers of crystal and stone, into chambers that had not been opened in 10,000 years. There, in the darkness, they found the beacon of last resort. It was not a Volanti creation. Long ago, before the Volanti had even developed space travel, another civilization had visited their world. These visitors had been kind. They had seen that the Volanti were a peaceful people, and they had worried about what might happen if that peace was ever broken. So they had left behind a gift, a device that could send a message across the entire galaxy, a cry for help that would reach any species capable of hearing it. "We never used it," the elder explained. "We never needed to. We hoped we never would." Ambassador Crystalline Dawn studied the ancient machine. It was made of metals and materials she did not recognize, covered in symbols from a language no living being could read. But its purpose was clear. It was a last chance, a final hope. If we use this, she said, someone might answer. Or no one might answer, the elder replied. Or someone might answer who is just as dangerous as the Keth. We do not know who is out there. We do not know what kind of beings might hear our call. The ambassador's light flickered with uncertainty. She looked at the faces of the other elders, saw their fear, their despair. She thought about the millions who had already died, the billions more who would die if nothing was done. She thought about her own children, still young, their crystals still growing, their lights still learning to speak. We have no other choice, she said. The elder nodded slowly. No, we do not. Together, they activated the beacon. The ancient machine hummed to life, glowing with power that had waited 10,000 years for this moment. A pulse of energy shot outward, piercing through normal space and diving into the strange dimension beneath it, spreading in all directions at speeds that should have been impossible. The message was simple. The Volanthi did not know how to say much in a language that strangers could understand. So they said the only thing that mattered. We are dying. Please, help us. Then they waited. One day passed. Then two. The Keth continued their advance. Another colony fell. The Volanthi began to lose hope. Perhaps no one had heard. Perhaps no one cared. Perhaps they were truly alone in a universe that did not care about peace or beauty or light. On the third day, a response came. Ambassador Crystalline Dawn was the first to receive it. She was in the communication center, watching the empty screens, when suddenly every display lit up at once. Signals poured in from across the galaxy, so many that the Volanthi systems could barely process them all. What is happening? She asked, her light pulsing with shock. The technician beside her was trembling. Someone heard us. Many someones. They are coming. Who? Who is coming? The technician pulled up the source of the signals, tracing them back through space to a single point of origin. A small yellow star in a distant arm of the galaxy. A star the Volanthi had marked in their charts as dangerous and uninteresting. A star with a single inhabited planet, a planet classified as a Class 7 death world. Humans, the technician said, reading the name from the incoming transmissions. They call themselves humans. Ambassador Crystalline Dawn had never heard of humans. She pulled up everything the Volanthi knew about their world, a planet called Earth. What she found made her light pulse with confusion and fear. Earth was a nightmare. Its gravity was crushing. Its atmosphere was filled with corrosive oxygen. Its surface was covered with liquid water and active volcanoes and violent storms. Massive predators roamed its lands. Tiny invisible creatures caused horrible diseases. The temperatures swung from freezing to boiling depending on location and season. No civilized species could possibly survive on such a world. Yet something had. Something was coming to help them. The ambassador did not know whether to feel hope or terror. She only knew that the universe had answered their call, and now they would discover what kind of answer it was. Ambassador Crystalline Dawn over still waters stood at the observation deck of the Volanthi's last remaining space station and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the Keth were still advancing. Somewhere out there, help was coming. She did not know which would arrive first. The humans had sent a message saying they were on their way. The message had been short and confusing. It contained words the Volanthi translation system struggled to understand. Words like fleet and combat and ordnance. The ambassador had spent hours trying to make sense of it. They are very strange, she had told the elder. Their language is full of concepts we do not have. They seem to organize themselves into groups that compete with each other. They have a concept called military that appears to be entirely focused on causing harm to others. Perhaps they are no better than the Keth, the elder had worried. Perhaps, the ambassador had agreed. But they answered our call. They are coming to help. We must give them a chance. Now she waited, watching the empty space where the humans had said they would arrive. The Volanthi did not know much about human technology, but the message had mentioned something called faster than light travel. The ambassador did not fully understand how it worked. She only knew that the humans had promised to come quickly. She was not prepared for what happened next. Space itself seemed to tear open. A hole appeared in the fabric of reality, glowing with strange energy, and from that hole emerged a ship. The ambassador's first thought was that something had gone wrong. The ship was so ugly, so rough, so completely unlike anything she had ever seen. It looked like it had been built by someone who did not care about beauty at all. Its hull was dark and scarred and covered with strange bumps and protrusions. There were no graceful curves, no artistic touches, no attempt to make it pleasing to look at. Then more holes opened. More ships emerged. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. What are those things on the outside of their hulls? The ambassador asked the technician beside her. The technician ran a scan and went very still. Weapons, Ambassador. Those are weapons. All of them? Yes. Every protrusion, every bump, every attachment. They are all designed to cause destruction. These ships are covered in devices meant to tear other ships apart. The ambassador stared at the growing fleet. In 12,000 years of Volanthi history, they had never built a single weapon. These humans had built ships that were nothing but weapons. What kind of beings were they? A communication came through from the lead ship. The ambassador accepted it, and suddenly she was looking at a human for the first time. The creature was small, much smaller than she had expected. It stood on two legs, with two arms, a round head, and a flat face with two forward-facing eyes. It was covered in some kind of artificial skin clothing the translator supplied, and its face was arranged in an expression the ambassador could not read. "Ambassador," the human said. Its voice was rough and strange, nothing like the musical tones of Volanthi light speech. "I am Admiral Chun Wei-Lin of the United Nations Navy. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." The ambassador's light pulsed with the formal greeting of her people. "Admiral Chun, I am Ambassador Crystalline Dawn over still waters. On behalf of the Volanthi Concord, I thank you for answering our call. We did not know if anyone would hear us. We heard you." The human's expression shifted. The corners of its mouth moved upward. Later, the ambassador would learn this was called a smile, and that it usually indicated friendliness. At the time, it looked slightly frightening. "Half the galaxy heard you. Your beacon is pretty loud. You are the only ones who came. We're the only ones who could get here fast enough. Some of the other species who responded are still weeks away. We were closer." The admiral paused. "And we travel faster than most." Behind her, more ships continued to emerge from the strange holes in space. The ambassador counted them, her crystal mind struggling to keep up. 200. 300. Still more coming. "How many ships did you bring?" she asked. "This is the third fleet," Admiral Chen replied. "About 400 vessels. The first and second fleets are securing your outer colonies, trying to slow down the Keth advance. The fourth through seventh fleets are still on their way." The ambassador's light flickered with confusion. "You have 7 fleets? We have more than that. But 7 is what we could mobilize quickly. When your signal reached Earth, we put out a call to all human colonies. Everyone who could spare a ship sent one." The admiral's smile faded, replaced by something harder. "We don't get a lot of distress calls from alien civilizations. When we do, we take it seriously." A new thought occurred to the ambassador. "You have never received such a call before." "Never. You're our first contact with intelligent alien life. We always wondered if we were alone in the universe. Turns out we're not." The Admiral's eyes, those strange, forward-facing predator's eyes, seemed to study the ambassador through the screen. We hoped our first meeting would be under better circumstances. But this will do. The ambassador did not know what to say. These humans had crossed vast distances of space, brought hundreds of warships, mobilized their entire civilization, all because they had received a call for help from strangers they had never met. Why? She asked. You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you come so far, risk so much for people you have never met? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Ambassador, where we come from, there's a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We heard your signal. We heard that something was hurting you, killing your people, destroying your worlds. We could have ignored it. We could have stayed home and pretended it wasn't our problem. She shook her head. That's not who we are. That's not who we want to be. But the danger is real. Yes, we know. We've studied your data on the Keth. They're powerful and numerous, and they've destroyed every species they've encountered. The Admiral's expression hardened again. They've never encountered humans. The ambassador felt something she had not felt since the Keth first appeared. It took her a moment to recognize it. It was hope. Your ships, she said. They are very different from ours. All those weapons. Our world is not a gentle place, Admiral Chai explained. Earth is what we call a death world. Everything there is trying to kill everything else. We evolved fighting for survival against predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. We learned a long time ago that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to destroy what threatens it. You fight each other? Your own kind? We have. More than we should have. We're not proud of our history, Ambassador. We've done terrible things to each other over the centuries. But we learned from those mistakes. We learned that there are things worth fighting for and things worth dying for. The Admiral leaned closer to the screen. Your people are worth fighting for. Your children are worth dying for. And if the Keth think they can just sweep through this galaxy taking whatever they want, they're about to learn that some things fight back. The ambassador's crystal body resonated with emotions she could not name. Fear and hope and confusion and something else, something new. She looked at this small, strange creature from an impossible world, and she began to understand. The Volanthi had called for help. The universe had answered. And the answer was humanity, a species forged in the fires of a death world, tempered by millennia of struggle, and willing to cross the stars to protect strangers they had never met. Welcome to Volanthi Space, Admiral Chen, the ambassador said. I believe we have much to discuss. Yes, the Admiral agreed. We do. Starting with how we're going to make the Keth regret ever coming here. Word spread through human space like fire across dry grass. The news carried across light years, jumping from colony to colony, station to station, world to world. Somewhere out there, in a distant corner of the galaxy, humanity had made first contact with alien life, and that alien life needed help. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Chen had expected reinforcements. She had hoped for perhaps a few hundred more ships, enough to hold the line while the Volanthi evacuated their remaining worlds. What she received was beyond anything she had imagined. Dodge ships came from everywhere. The great military fleets of Earth arrived first, massive warships that had been built to defend human colonies from threats that had never come. Behind them came the colonial defense forces, smaller but still powerful, ships designed to protect the settlements scattered across 100 worlds. Then came the merchant marine, civilian vessels hastily armed with whatever weapons could be found and mounted. But that was only the beginning. Private citizens began to arrive. Wealthy individuals who owned personal spacecraft showed up with their ships loaded with supplies and volunteers. Mining companies sent their heavy haulers, their hulls thick enough to take punishment, and their cargo holds full of raw materials for repairs. Scientists came with research vessels, offering their knowledge of physics and engineering. Doctors came with hospital ships, ready to treat the wounded. Veterans came too. Men and women who had served in humanity's various conflicts over the years, who had put down their weapons and tried to live peaceful lives. They dug their old uniforms out of storage, cleaned their personal weapons, and reported to recruitment stations that have been empty for decades. "I don't understand," Ambassador Crystalline Dawn said, watching the fleet grow larger every day. "These are not military people. Many of them have no training, no experience. Why did they come?" Admiral Chun stood beside her on the observation deck, equally amazed by what she was seeing. "Because they feel they have to. Because they can't stand by and do nothing while innocent people are being killed. But they are not soldiers. They will die. Maybe, probably some of them will. They know that." The Admiral shook her head. "Ambassador, you have to understand something about humans. We argue with each other constantly. We fight over politics, religion, resources, ideas. We have 100 different governments, 1,000 different cultures, 1,000,000 different opinions about how things should be done. We can barely agree on anything." She gestured at the gathering fleet. "But sometimes something happens that makes all those differences seem small. Something threatens someone who can't protect themselves. Someone cries out for help. And when that happens, we stop arguing. We put aside our differences. We come together. Why? What makes this different from your other conflicts? Because this isn't about us. This isn't about who's right or who's in charge or who gets what. This is about helping people who need it. That's something almost every human can agree on." The Admiral smiled slightly. "We're complicated creatures, Ambassador. We can be selfish and cruel and petty, but we can also be generous and brave and kind. When we have a chance to be heroes, most of us will take it." A new wave of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the Ambassador saw something that made her like pulse with surprise. These ships were old, ancient by human standards. Their designs were outdated, their hulls worn and patched. They looked like they belonged in a museum. "What are those?" "Memorial ships," Admiral Chun said softly. "Warships from old conflicts. Some of them are over 200 years old. They were preserved as monuments, reminders of the sacrifices made in wars long past." Her voice was thick with emotion. "Their original crews are all dead, but their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are flying them now. They pulled them out of the museums and made them work again. Why would they do such a thing? Because those ships have history. Because people died on them, fighting for what they believed in. And now their descendants want to honor that sacrifice by continuing the fight." The Admiral wiped something from her eye tears. The Ambassador had learned they were called. "We humans have a complicated relationship with our past. We're not proud of everything we've done, but we remember our heroes. We remember the people who stood up when it mattered, and we want to be like them." Over the following days, the Ambassador spent time among the human volunteers. She walked through their ships, spoke with their crews, tried to understand what drove them. The answers she received were as varied as humanity itself. A young woman from a colony world told her, "My grandmother was a refugee. She came to our planet with nothing, escaping a disaster on her home world. Strangers took her in, gave her food and shelter and a chance to start over. She always told me that kindness has to be passed on. Now it's my turn." An old man who had been a soldier in his youth said, "I've seen what war does to people. I've seen the worst of humanity, but I've also seen the best. I've seen people risk everything for strangers. I've seen courage and sacrifice and love. I want to see more of that before I die." A teenager who had lied about his age to join the fleet admitted, "I'm scared. I've never been in a fight before. But I keep thinking about the Volante children. What if it was my little sister? What if nobody came to help? I'd want someone to come. So I'm going." The ambassador shared these conversations with Admiral Chun late one night. When the fleet was finally assembled and preparing for the battle to come, "They are all so different," she said. "Their reasons, their backgrounds, their beliefs. But they all came. That's humanity for you." The Admiral was reviewing tactical data, but she paused to look at the ambassador. "We're a mess of contradictions. We can be cruel and kind, selfish and generous, cowardly and brave. But when it counts, when something truly important is on the line, we tend to find our better angels." Better angels? An old expression. It means the best parts of ourselves. The parts that want to do good, to help others, to make the universe a little better than we found it. She returned to her data. "Tomorrow, we face the Keth. We're still outnumbered, but not by as much as before. And we have something they don't have. What is that? Purpose. The Keth fight because it's their nature. They consume because that's all they know. We fight for something. We fight for your people, for our people, for the chance to prove that there's more to life than just survival." The Admiral smiled grimly. "That might not seem like much in a battle of ships and weapons, but you'd be surprised how much it matters." The ambassador looked out at the vast fleet. Thousands of ships from 100 worlds, crewed by millions of humans who had chosen to be there. Some were professional soldiers. Some were civilians who had never fired a weapon. Some were old and some were young and some were somewhere in between. But they all had one thing in common. They had heard a call for help and they had answered. "I think I am beginning to understand," the ambassador said quietly. "Your species is not defined by your worst qualities. You are defined by what you do when you are called to be more." Admiral Chun nodded. "We try, Ambassador. We don't always succeed, but we try. And tomorrow, we're going to try harder than we've ever tried before." The fleet moved into position. The greatest armada in human history prepared for battle. And across the void, the Keth swarm waited, unaware that they were about to face something they had never encountered before. A species that chose to fight, not for survival, but for love. The first battle between humans and the Keth happened 3 days after the fleet arrived. A group of Keth scout ships was moving toward one of the Volante refugee stations, where thousands of survivors from the fallen worlds had gathered. Admiral Chun sent a squadron of human destroyers to intercept them. "Ambassador." Crystalline Dawn watched the battle from the command center of the Admiral's flagship, a massive vessel called the UN's Defiance. She had never seen violence before. She had never watched beings try to kill each other. The experience changed her in ways she could not fully understand. The Keth ships were beautiful in their own terrible way. They moved like living things, flowing through space with perfect grace. Their weapons were elegant beams of light that cut through metal like it was paper. They outnumbered the human squadron 2-1, and their ships were faster and more advanced than the humans won anyway. How? The ambassador asked afterward, her light pulsing with shock. How did they do that? The Keth ships were better in every way. Admiral Chun was sitting in her command chair, reading reports from the battle. She looked tired but satisfied. The Keth made a mistake. They assumed that better technology means automatic victory. They've conquered dozens of species with that assumption. It's never been wrong before. What changed? Us? The Admiral turned to face the ambassador. The Keth ships were faster, so our captains used the asteroids in the field as cover, forcing close-range combat where speed matters less. The Keth weapons were more powerful, so our gunners focused on their engines first, crippling their ability to maneuver. The Keth had numbers, so our squadrons worked together, coordinating their attacks to concentrate firepower. But they still took heavy damage. I saw ships burning, crews dying. Yes, we lost 2 destroyers. 87 people died. The Admiral's voice was heavy. That's the cost of war. It's ugly, and it's brutal, and I hate it. But those 87 people chose to be there. They knew the risks. They decided that protecting your refugee station was worth their lives. The ambassador could not understand this. In Volanthi culture, every life was precious. Every death a tragedy. The idea of choosing to die, of deciding that some goal was more important than your own existence, was completely foreign to her way of thinking. Why? She asked. Why would they make that choice? Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to the observation window, looking out at the stars. Let me tell you about Earth, Ambassador. Let me tell you what it means to be human. She spoke for hours. She told the ambassador about a planet where life itself was a constant struggle, where every creature had to fight for food and shelter and survival. She told her about predators with teeth and claws, about diseases that could kill millions, about natural disasters that could wipe out entire civilizations. She told her about ice ages and volcanoes and earthquakes and floods. Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else, the Admiral explained, including us. We evolved as prey animals first, then learned to fight back. We developed weapons and tools and strategies. We formed groups for protection. We learned to work together against common threats. And you fought each other as well. Yes, too often. We fought over food, territory, resources, ideas, beliefs. We killed each other by the millions. Our history is full of horrible conflicts, terrible atrocities, unforgivable sins. The Admiral's voice was sad. But we also learned. We learned that fighting isn't just about destruction. It's about protection. The warrior who stands between their family and a predator isn't fighting because they enjoy violence. They're fighting because they love something more than they fear death. The ambassador thought about this. And these people who died today? The 87? They were fighting for something they believed in. They heard your call for help. They heard that innocent people were being slaughtered by an enemy they couldn't fight. They decided that protecting you was worth the risk. The Admiral turned back to face the ambassador. That's what makes us human, Ambassador. Not the fighting itself. The reason behind it. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because we care. Before the ambassador could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Red lights flashed. Officers rushed to their stations. Admiral Chun moved quickly back to her command chair. What is happening? The ambassador asked. The Cathmain fleet. They've changed course. They're heading directly for us. The Admiral's face was grim. It seems they've noticed us. The tactical display lit up with thousands of enemy contacts. The Keth swarm was vast, far larger than the human fleet. Their ships filled the screen like a dark cloud spreading across the stars. There are so many, the ambassador whispered. Yes. Admiral Chun began giving orders, her voice calm and steady. All ships, combat formation. Prepare for engagement. Tell the refugee stations to begin evacuation. Can you win? The Admiral looked at the display for a long moment before answering. Probably not. Not here, not now. We're outnumbered badly. But we can slow them down. We can give your people time to escape. We can make the Keth pay for every inch of space they take. And your people will die. Some of them? Maybe many of them. Maybe all of them. The Admiral's voice did not waver. That's the job. That's what we signed up for. When you put on this uniform, you're making a promise. You're saying that you'll stand between the innocent and the darkness, no matter the cost. The ambassador watched as the human fleet moved into formation. preparing to face an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. She saw no fear on the faces around her, no hesitation. These small, fragile creatures from an impossible world were ready to die for strangers they had known for only a few days. "I do not understand you," she admitted. "Your willingness to sacrifice yourselves. It goes against every instinct of survival." Admiral Chun smiled that strange human smile. "That's because you're thinking about it wrong. We're not sacrificing ourselves. We're protecting something. There's a difference." She gestured at the screen, at the approaching Keth fleet. "Those things out there? They only know how to take. They only know how to consume. They look at your people and see resources to harvest. They look at the galaxy and see a meal." Her voice hardened. "We look at the galaxy and see something worth protecting. We look at your people and see neighbors, potential friends, fellow travelers in a universe that's often cold and dark and dangerous. And when our neighbors are in trouble, we help, even if it costs us everything." The first Keth ships entered weapons range. The battle began. And Ambassador Crystalline Dawn over still waters watched as humanity showed her what it truly meant to fight for something you believe in. The engagement lasted 6 hours. The humans lost 32 ships. The Keth lost over 100. When it was over, the swarm had been forced to retreat and regroup, and the refugee stations had escaped to safety. Admiral Chun stood in the middle of her damaged bridge, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. And she smiled. "That's how we do it," she said. "One fight at a time. One life at a time. Until they learn that some prey fights back." The ambassador understood then. The humans were not just warriors. They were guardians, protectors. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. And instead of becoming monsters, they had become something else. They had become the thing that monsters feared. The Battle of Volanthi Prime lasted 6 days. It would be remembered as the largest space battle in recorded galactic history, and the first time the Keth swarm had ever faced defeat. On the first day, the Keth attacked with overwhelming force. They came in waves, thousands of ships darkening the stars, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly fire. They expected quick victory, as they had achieved against every other species they had encountered. They believed their numbers and their technology would crush this new enemy as easily as all the others. They were wrong. The human fleet did not fight like any enemy the Keth had faced before. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They fought dirty. They used asteroids as shields and weapons. They laid traps and ambushed. They sacrificed small groups to lure larger groups into killing zones. They were creative and unpredictable and absolutely ruthless. Ambassador Crystalline Dawn watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the battle unfolded. She had thought she understood humans after her conversations with Admiral Chun and the volunteers. She had thought she knew what they were capable of. She had been wrong. The humans were terrifying. They took damage that would have destroyed Volanthi ships, and they kept fighting. Their crews suffered casualties, and instead of retreating, they pressed harder. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they rammed their ships into enemy vessels. When their ships were too damaged to fly, they launched boarding parties and fought hand-to-hand inside Keth carriers. On the second day, a human destroyer named the Moscow found itself surrounded by Keth ships. Its engines destroyed, its weapons nearly depleted. The captain, a woman named Elena Volkov, had a choice. She could surrender and hope for mercy. She could try to escape in the lifeboats. Or she could do something else. She chose something else. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered. "Everyone into the escape pods." Except me. Her crew tried to argue. They tried to stay with her. She refused. "Someone has to fly this thing into that carrier," she said, pointing at the largest Keth vessel on her screen. And I'm the best pilot on this ship. Go. Tell my family I love them. Tell them I died doing something that mattered." She flew the Moscow directly into the Keth carrier's engine section and detonated her reactor. The explosion destroyed both ships and damaged 3 others nearby. The ambassador learned about this from Admiral Chun, who spoke of it with tears in her eyes and pride in her voice. "Why?" the ambassador asked. "Why would she do that?" "She could have lived, because those Keth ships were heading for your refugee stations. If she had let them pass, thousands of your people would have died. She made a choice. A life or theirs." The admiral wiped her eyes. "That's what humans do. When we love something enough, we'll give everything to protect it." The 3rd and 4th days were a grinding, bloody stalemate. Both sides took heavy losses. The space around Volanthi Prime filled with wreckage and debris and the bodies of the dead. The humans were pushed back, then pushed forward, then back again. Every victory was paid for in blood by the 5th day. The Keth swarm had lost more ships than in all their previous conquests combined. But they were still winning. Their numbers were simply too great. For every Keth ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The human fleet was shrinking while the swarm seemed endless. Admiral Chun called a meeting of her surviving captains. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her uniform stained with blood from wounds she had refused to let the doctors treat. "We're losing," she said simply. "We've hurt them badly, but not badly enough. At this rate, they'll break through our lines within 2 days." The captains looked at each other. No one spoke. "There's one option left," the admiral continued. "The Swarm Queen. Their collective intelligence is centered in a single massive ship at the heart of their fleet. If we destroy it, we destroy their coordination, their leadership, their ability to function as a unified force. That ship is surrounded by their heaviest defenses," one captain said. "Anyone who goes after it is not coming back. I know." Admiral Chun straightened. "I'm going to lead the strike personally. I need volunteers." Every captain in the room raised their hand. The assault began at dawn on the 6th day. Admiral Chun led a strike force of 50 ships directly into the heart of the Keth fleet. They fought through wave after wave of defenders, losing ships with every passing minute. By the time they reached the Queen's vessel, only 12 remained. The Defiance was among them. Its hull was breached in dozens of places. Its weapons were nearly exhausted. Half its crew was dead or wounded. Admiral Chun had a broken arm and a piece of shrapnel in her leg. She refused to leave the bridge. "All ships, concentrate fire on the Queen's vessel," she ordered. "Everything we have. Don't stop until she's dead." The final assault was brutal. The Queen's defenses were overwhelming. Ships exploded around the Defiance. Friends died. Hope faded. But the humans kept fighting, pouring fire into the massive Keth vessel, refusing to give up. Finally, the Defiance was the only ship left. Its weapons were empty. Its engines were failing. But it was close enough to do one last thing. "All hands, abandon ship," Admiral Chun ordered. "Get to the escape pods." "Admiral, what are you doing?" "What needs to be done?" She gripped the controls of her dying ship. "It's been an honor serving with you all. Now go." The crew evacuated. Admiral Chun flew the Defiance directly into the Queen's vessel. But Admiral Chun flew the Defiance directly into the Queen's vessel. She punched through its weakened hull and detonated the reactor in the very heart of the beast. The explosion was visible from across the system. The Queen died. The swarm's collective intelligence shattered. Without her guidance, the Keth ships fell into chaos, attacking each other, fleeing in random directions. Losing all coordination, the human fleet swept through them like fire through dry leaves. By sunset, it was over. The Keth swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was broken. Not destroyed completely, They would take years to hunt down every last ship, but broken beyond recovery. They would never threaten anyone again. Ambassador Crystalline Dawn stood in the wreckage of the battlefield and wept. She wept for her people who had died. She wept for the humans who had sacrificed everything to save strangers they had never met. She wept for Admiral Chun, whose body was never found, who had given her life for people who were not even her own species. In the years that followed, the Volanti rebuilt. Their worlds healed. Their people recovered. And they never forgot what humanity had done for them. They built monuments on every surviving world. Statues of human soldiers, carved from Volanti crystal, standing guard over peaceful gardens. They wrote songs and stories about the Battle of Volanti Prime, about the brave warriors from the Deathworld who had crossed the stars to save them. And at the center of their capital city, they erected a special monument. A statue of Admiral Chun Wei-Lin standing tall, her broken arm raised toward the stars, her face set with determination. Below it, an inscription in both Volanti light speech and human text. They asked for help. Humanity answered. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Other species heard about what had happened. They heard about the small, fierce creatures from an impossible world who had traveled vast distances to protect complete strangers. They heard about sacrifice and courage and love, and they learned something important. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel, but somewhere in the darkness there was a species that cared, a species that would fight for those who could not fight for themselves, a species that looked at the stars and saw not enemies to conquer, but neighbors to protect. The Volanti had sent a call for help into the void. Humanity had answered with an armada. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift. Not their weapons or their ships or their terrible capacity for violence. Their gift was hope. The knowledge that somewhere out there, in the dark between the stars, there were people who would come when you called. People who would bring wrath to your enemies and salvation to your children. People who were human.